This week, we are going to continue working with MS Project. Last week, we began to develop our MS Project schedule by following the steps suggested in the PMBOK for time management. We defined our activities, then sequenced our activities by determining the task dependencies. We then allocated resources to the activities and concluded working on our MS Project by entering our activity durations. We estimated our durations by soliciting input from experts in the field. This week, we will continue to hone our MS Project skills by applying concepts presented in the PMBOK to our MS Project schedule. The next step in the time management project as defined in the PMBOK is to develop schedule. The process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule. We will also be applying concepts from the estimating cost process in conjunction with refining our human resource plan and procurement plan. A word of caution, the MS Project schedule I will be using to demonstrate MS Project this week is similar to your case study project. However, dates, durations, resources, and costs are not the same. Do not rely on this data when you develop your schedule. Refer to the case study for all case study facts. I'm going to start to develop my schedule by verifying my resources from the resource sheet view. If I need to, I can add a resource from this view. Next, I will adjust the type of resource. There are three types of resources. A work resource. A work resource is a resource that incurs cost on an hourly basis or per use basis, such as an employee, a consultant, or rental equipment. Material resource. A material resource is a material that incurs cost on a per unit basis, such as manufactured parts, gas, sod, or stone. These are measured in units, each, gallons, square feet, tons, etc. Or a cost resource. A cost resource is a resource that incurs cost at a fixed rate, such as a contracted service, or an expenditure such as an airline ticket, meals, or gas. For the purpose of the office relocation study, only work and cost resources will be used and discussed. Material resources could have been used for the HP purchases, but because there are minimum quantities and the delivery is a one-time event, setting the computer up as a cost resource is more efficient. Had the computers been a larger quantity and installed over a period of time, setting them up as a material resource would have been useful to track. As you may have noticed, I have been going through and changing my contracted services to a cost resource. In other words, all my vendors are cost resources. Next, I enter my standard cost, overtime cost, or per use cost in the appropriate column for my work resources. Check the case study for the appropriate rates for each employee. I find that once the column is highlighted, using the F2 button is the best method to edit the data. I now enter my overtime costs. I will not be using per use cost for the employees. For work and cost resources, we have to choose how resources will accrue costs. The accrual method determines when the budgeted amount will be expensed, the start of a task, the end of a task, or prorated over the duration of the task. Per ShipSIM's accounting policies, vendors accrue at the start of the tasks. Employees are always prorated, and administrative accounts are accrued when accounting receives the invoice, typically after the task is completed. For a work resource, the default value of the max column is 100%. This means the resource is available for 100% of the available working time in the selected base calendar. Note, you may want to change the default value if the resource is not available 100% of the working time in the base calendar, or if the resource needs to be available more than the working time in the base calendar. For instance, a salary employee may work 60 hours per week. This employee would be available for 150% of the time available in the standard calendar. Take note of the alert before Michael C's name. This alert indicates Michael is scheduled for more than the calendar allows on one or more days. Michael often travels and sometimes has 20-hour days. To accommodate these days, I change his availability to 250%. I want to point out work resources have the option to assign various calendars. In my example, I have set up a calendar called Office Relocation Project. The default calendar is standard. To create a project calendar, go to the Project tab and select Change Working Time. The Change Working Time dialog box appears. To create a new calendar, select the Create New Calendar button. When the dialog box appears, type in the name of the new calendar. The default selection of Create Copy based on Standard should be left checked. I've already made my calendar and I've added several exceptions. Exceptions are any deviation from the standard calendar, which is working days of Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. To create an exception, I type the name of the exception in the exception list box. If I highlight the 11th, notice this is a standard working day. Next, click on the Details button. The dialog box appears. First, you have to choose whether the exception is to add non-working times or working time. I select working because I want to make this day a working day. I then change the default times to make this day end at 10 p.m. I have the choice to make this a reoccurring event or a one-time event. I leave the default one time and select the 11th as my start date. I could choose a series of dates by selecting an alternative end date. Notice when I go back to my calendar view, my exception date is light blue. Then I click on the date and I can see the modified times. The calendar feature is a very powerful feature. Calendars can be created for individual resources or for individual tasks. One of the most powerful features of Microsoft Project is its ability to automatically schedule tasks based on constraints such as dependencies and relationships such as lead and lag times. Clicking on a task, we can see the General tab. The schedule mode is set to Auto Schedule. Auto Schedule is the default mode and should be used for scheduling most tasks. In fact, the Manually Schedule option is a new option in Project 2010. Manual Schedule gives the users the option of scheduling known dates. In the video, I select Manual Schedule and I pick a new date. Notice how one of the tasks now has a red underline. This is an alert that the manual task has affected one of my dependencies. When I go to the task and right-click, I have the option to respect the link, thus updating the schedule. The dates in blue are all the dates that have been changed as a result of my manually scheduled task. I like this new feature, but I must confess I am not 100% proficient in its use yet. Also, after using this feature for the first time recently, I am not convinced Microsoft has worked out all the bugs. I noticed some quirky behavior with a few of my manual tasks. I did find the feature useful for scheduling the install date for the relocated computers and files. Proceed with caution. If you run into issues, please share them with the rest. Next, I want to introduce the concept of lead and lag times. Lead is a time constraint that precedes an activity, and a lag is a time constraint that follows an activity. When I call a vendor to check on the availability of a product, I often say, what is the lead time for delivery? In other words, how much notice do I have to give the vendor if I want delivery on a specific date? The vendor may say 5 days. Therefore, if I want delivery on the 15th, I must call in the delivery on the 10th. The task order materials has a lead of 5 days on the task deliver materials. Let's look at painting for an example of a lag time. Painting requires 2 coats. I am using a special enamel paint that requires a 24-hour cure to the class. Therefore, the task paint second coat has a lag 1 day from the task paint first coat. Some project managers prefer to start a project with a known end date and work backwards. For instance, if I have a task project complete, I could form dependencies using lead times and work backward, just as I did with my delivery example. I prefer to work forward with a known start date and schedule my activities based on known lag times. In the following examples, I will demonstrate how lag times can be applied to tasks to produce a cleaner and clearer project schedule. Let me start by looking at the task Bidders Conference. Bidders Conference has a dependency on Task 3 Advertised Bid. In this particular project, the Bidders Conference took place 9 days after the ad was placed. Therefore, the tasks have a start-to-start relationship. Once the ad starts, the conference starts date lags by 9 days. Now look at the task Issue Addenda. This task has a dependency on the Task Bidder Conference. However, in the example, the dependency is a finish to start dependency. Once the bidder conference is finished, the start of the task issue addenda lags by 5 days. Take a look at how using lag times affects your calendar. Solid lines should represent tasks that occur over a period of time, such as prepare RFP or advertise the bid. Tasks such as issue addenda or bid opening are only one-day events with lag dependencies illustrated by a thin line. Let's take one more look at a start-to-finish relationship. Michael wants to arrive in Florida the day the petitions are delivered. Therefore, the task Michael travel to Florida is dependent on the start of the task deliver furniture. Michael will leave in the morning and will arrive in Florida the day the furniture is delivered. Had the relationship been a finish-to-start relationship, Michael would have started the task traveling to Florida the following day. Likewise, if you want telecom to arrive before they start the task install wiring and racks, then you can establish a start-to-finish dependency. You could also establish a start-to-lag of -1, which is actually a lead time of 1 day. Are you confused yet? Project has 2 other dependencies, finish-to-finish and finish-to-start. Now are you confused? There are no hard and fast rules to picking dependencies and applying lead and lag times. With practice, you will develop your own style. I prefer to throw a forward pass. In other words, I begin with a start date, then add finish-to-start dependencies and lags, working my way to the end of the project. However, if the completion date does not meet my overall project objective, I manually adjust my end date and throw a backward pass, working backward through my dependencies until I reach my objective. I sometimes have to throw several passes in both directions. Another tool Microsoft Project has is a milestone task. A milestone does not have a duration or a resource. A milestone is used to identify key dates within a schedule. My task, Open Office for Business, is a milestone task. To create a milestone, simply double-click the task to access the Task Information dialog box. From the Advanced tab, check the milestone box in the lower left-hand corner. Once I determine my milestone date, I change it to a manually scheduled task. Next, I will demonstrate an advanced scheduling technique. You will be tempted to use this technique in your project this week, but do not apply this technique until you are instructed to do so in the case study. The task Install Telephones has a finish-to-start dependency on install wiring and racks. However, if Telecom had 2 crews, the second crew could start installing telephones soon after the first crew started installing the wire. This is a start-to-start dependency with a lag. My example illustrates the compressed timeline as a result of using this technique. In my example, I changed the dependency back to a finish-to-start dependency. Notice the impact on the schedule. Also notice auto-schedule items automatically adjust, whereas my manually scheduled tasks remained unchanged. So far in this lesson, we have reviewed resource types, types of cost, accrual methods, project calendars, lead times, lag times, dependency relationships, and milestones. Use these features to develop your project schedule. Microsoft Project is also a robust budgeting tool. Next, we will explore the methods used to assign costs to resources.